Willkommen in einem aufregendes Video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 12 from my Star Trek The Original Series episode breakdown video series. In this video I'll be looking at season 3 episodes 62 to 67 of Star Trek The Original Series or Generation to identify historical references which can be used to determine the original history of the Star Trek universe. The episode order I'm using is the production order. In order to understand the development of the history or vision of Star Trek, we need to study the episodes in the order they were written. While I'm uncertain of the exact writing order, the production order is about as close as I can confirm. The episode order information as broadcast is also included. Special thanks to the transcripts which can be found on the Geschichte site. When Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek back in 1966, he had a vision which remained basically consistent over the following 3 years. The animated series and early movies retained this consistency in the most part. When The Next Generation was released in 1987, Gene's vision had changed and the past needed to change in order to be consistent with this new vision. This video series will look at the original vision of Star Trek, starting with the earlier source material. Any historical facts from later sources which contradict the earlier references must be assumed to be in error for the purposes of this video. Minor changes in nomenclature will be excused. Is There in Truth No Beauty is the 5th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 62nd episode produced. Its stardate is 5630.7 and its original air date was the 18th of October 1968. In this episode we're introduced to the Medusans. The Medusans are a very alien race which are probably a member of the Federation. They have a home planet which I assume may be called Medusa. During the episode, the Enterprise is sent well outside the galaxy and unable to return for some reason. Spock indicates they entered a space-time continuum, whatever that means. The main takeaway from this episode is we discover yet another Federation planet, the Medusans' home planet. Its name is unknown, but Medusa is probably a good name. We also have the Enterprise travel outside of the galaxy and they manage to get back again, so this could be the first time they've gone so far. The Empath is the 12th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 63rd episode produced. Its stardate is 5121.5 and its original air date was the 6th of December 1968. In this episode we're told of a Federation research base on the second planet of the Minaran star system. The star system will go nova soon. Apparently there are civilizations on other planets either within the star system or perhaps close to the star system, which will also be destroyed when the sun goes nova. We also learn in this episode of another alien planet, this time Manarak 4. It's unknown if it's inhabited or if it's a member of the Federation, but it's certainly an alien planet. We're introduced to an advanced race called the Vians, who wish to save one of the civilizations being threatened with destruction. Where they come from or who they are is unknown. They look like first cousins to the Talos people, which is in the script notes. Perhaps they are the preservers or descendants of the preservers. If so, their morality leaves a lot to be desired. Two big-headed aliens in silver robes appear first cousins to the Talos systems. By the looks of it is the quote in the script. The inhabitants of one of the planets is introduced to us, Gem. Gem is an empath inhabitant of one of the planets being threatened with extinction. She is mute. I have no idea if any other civilizations are being tested, but this is implied. Key takeaway from this episode is we discover an advanced civilization called the Vians. We have no idea where their planet or planets reside. They would have come from anywhere. It's possible they are linked to the preservers, and as they look like the inhabitants of Talos, perhaps there is a link there as well. The Talosians went underground in 198,000 BC, but perhaps some did not and eventually became the preservers. The second planet of the Minaran star system has a Federation research base on it. The Vians are also using this for their tests to determine which civilization to save. There must be at least 2 civilizations threatened by the nova. They could be in the Minaran star system or close by. One of the planets of the Empath, called Gem, is what I will call the planet Gem. I have no idea of the other planets or civilizations. Presumably they will end up being destroyed. Finally, an alien planet is mentioned, Manarak 4. It's probably an uninhabited alien planet. The Tholian Web is the 9th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 64th episode produced. Its stardate is 5693.2 and its original air date was the 15th of November 1968. In the episode, a Federation starship called Defiant is mentioned and it has been missing. This appears to be a sister ship to the Enterprise. According to Memory Alpha, this was the USS Defiant, NCC 1764, which was a constitutional class starship of the 23rd century, so is a sister ship to the Enterprise. The spot the Defiant was lost allows different universes to overlap. Perhaps something similar to the Evil universe was overlapping with it, who knows. This could be used to allow travel between alternate universes. Possibly. However, this idea was never used in any subsequent episode. We discover in this episode the Tholian Assembly. There is another alien race, in this case what's called the Tholian Assembly. This is probably a multi-planet political unit consisting of a single race. It seems the Federation is aware of this race due to the comment, the traditional punctuality of the Tholians. The takeaway from this episode is the name of a Federation starship, in this case a Constitution-class starship called Defiant. The other is the existence of another alien race, the Tholians. They would have at least consisted of a single home planet and probably consist of many planets. They're probably not in the Federation, but nonetheless have some sort of agreement with the Federation. For the World is Hollow and I've Touched the Sky is the 8th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 65th episode produced. Its stardate is 5476.3 and its original air date was the 8th of November 1968. In this episode, the Enterprise encounters an asteroid which is being used as a generation starship. It seems to be called Yonada and was probably launched about 10,000 years ago, if not a lot before. The home planet of the Yonada generation starship is Fabrini, which was a planet destroyed by a nova. This civilization must have had some form of spaceflight capability to allow its language to survive after 10,000 years, as its home planets were destroyed. Let's assume it's established some form of repository of its history in a faraway planet which was discovered by the Federation, which is why the Federation has discovered it. Obviously also this civilization must have had spaceflight or a primitive version in order to launch this generation ship. We also get another Federation colony in this episode called Adara 5. It may be a full member, but was more likely a well-developed colony. It's unknown if it's human or alien, but it's probably at least humanoid, otherwise it was not a good home for the survivors of the Fabrini. In conclusion from this episode, Fabrini was a planet which was destroyed 10,000 years ago but managed to send off a colony ship in an asteroid, a generation starship basically. They must have also deposited information on a planet far away to not be destroyed by the nova to allow the Federation to find it and recognize its writings. Daran 5 looks like a Federation member or colony planet, probably a well-developed colony with humans or humanoid people on it. The Day of the Dove is the 7th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 66th episode produced. Its stardate is unknown and its original air date was the 1st of November 1968. We discover in the episode there is a colony on Beta 12 which was destroyed. We later discover this was an illusion, but the number of people in a newly established colony is set at about 100, which is at least one bit of information from this illusion. We discover in the episode there's been a peace treaty between the Klingons and the Federation for at least 3 years, and both sides avoided any conflict for that period, which is a real stretch. The last war, which was stopped by an alien race in 2264, was 2 years ago. I suspect an error factor of 1 year is reasonable because we're never really certain what year each episode actually resides in. On the other hand, it's perhaps this is actually the 4th year of Kirk's mission. It's easier to assume the 3 years is an error and actually means 2 years rather than assuming this episode resides in the 4th year of Kirk's mission. We discovered the Federation as a research outpost on Arcanus 4, which was attacked by the Klingon. Part of this was a illusion, but the research station was or may be real. However, the last long-term conflict was in 2245 or about, so I suspect some mixed memories are occurring in this particular episode, and that can be excused. Getting years out by one here and there is something that I suppose is completely acceptable. In the episode, we're introduced to an alien life force which feeds on hate. We have no idea of its origins. We discover the Klingon state, or at least one of the Klingon states, there are poor planets in the Klingon Empire, which is the reason why they are so aggressive. In conclusion, from the episode, we discover there is a planet called Beta 12, which is uninhabited. We also discover there is a Federation research station on Arcaris 4, which was attacked by the Klingons, possibly in 2245, killing 100 people. I'm uncertain how much of this was real or an illusion created by the alien. The Klingons have poor planets, which could explain why they are so aggressive. Plato's Stepchildren is the 10th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 67th episode produced. Its star date is 5784.2 and its original air date was the 22nd of November 1968. In the episode, the Enterprise surveys an unknown planet, discovers no inhabitants, but then later receives a distress call from that unknown planet. We discover the inhabitants of this unknown planet, which is called Plato, came from the planet of Chandrara, which experienced a supernova millennium ago. The survivors fled and landed on Earth about 360 BC before leaving and going to the unknown planet called Plato. The supernova occurred sometime before 360 BC. The survivors of Sandara arrived on Earth in 360 BC and lived with the Greeks, picking up the teaching of Plato. I suppose they must have just missed the other aliens who were living in ancient Greece at the same time. The aliens left when the Greek civilization collapsed. I think, or I suppose, Greek civilization collapsed when the Romans took it over, perhaps about 150 BC, but a later quote indicates this was 234 BC in an episode, so it could be either of those 2 years. The survivors of Sandara arrived on an unknown planet called Plato in 234 BC, which technically was well before the real collapse of Greek civilization, but let's just give that a pass for the present moment. Key takeaways from this episode are that we discover there is a planet called Sandara which housed an advanced civilization, but their sun went nova sometime before 360 BC, probably well before. Survivors fled and landed on Earth about 360 BC and left before 234 BC to found a new home on a planet called Plato in 234 BC. Many of the latter Star Trek movies and shows do not align with the original vision of the series. This is common in real history as later historians attempt to change the past to justify their new beliefs in the present. As I personally enjoyed the original vision of Star Trek, I would hope future TV shows and movies would go back to its original roots, but that is very unlikely. This concludes episode 12 of my Star Trek, the original series episode breakdown video series, in this case covering season 3, episodes 62 to 67. Alle guten Dingen kommen zu einem Ende.